If you think that moving to a beautiful, wealthy country is the ultimate ticket to a happy life, you have never experienced what it feels like to become an absolute ghost. My name is Maria, and exactly 6 months ago, I woke up in a cold, unfamiliar apartment in a foreign city with my 5-year-old twins, a locked bank account, and a suitcase full of useless documents. My husband didn't just leave us. He erased our legal existence before catching a midnight flight. But the real terror didn't start with the lack of money. It started when I noticed the identical gray sedans parked outside our building, and the strange handwritten letters tucked into our stroller. We weren't just abandoned. We were being monitored by a silent network that was waiting for us to make one single mistake. The transition from a secure, comfortable life to absolute survival was instantaneous. My husband Arthur had convinced me that moving abroad was the perfect opportunity for our family. He handled the visas, the apartment lease, and the financial paperwork. I trusted him completely, focusing on keeping our twins, Leo and Anya, calm during the long international flight. But on our 4th morning in this massive, concrete city where I couldn't speak a single word of the local language, I woke up to an empty closet. Arthur's clothes were gone. His passport was gone. When I tried to log into our shared bank application, a cold, clinical text message blinked on the screen, account terminated, compliance investigation pending. I had exactly 45 local coins in my jacket pocket, barely enough to buy a single carton of milk and a loaf of bread. I stood by the window of the gray, high-rise apartment, clutching my children's hands while the cold northern wind beat against the glass. The city below felt like an indifferent, mechanical monster. I didn't know the emergency numbers. I didn't know where the embassy was. And I couldn't ask for help because my tourist status was rapidly expiring. But as I scanned the street below, looking for a grocery store, my eyes locked onto a clean, gray sedan idling near the trash bins. The driver didn't get out. Through the dark windshield, I could see the faint white lines of a human silhouette staring directly up at our floor. I tried to tell myself it was just a random commuter. But when I went downstairs to get the mail, I found a small, folded piece of paper inside our empty mailbox. It contained no text, just a hand-drawn map of our neighborhood with a thick, red cross marked directly over our building. The next 48 hours transformed the foreign city into a psychological labyrinth. I couldn't go to the authorities because Arthur had secretly canceled our temporary residency applications before fleeing. Technically, my children and I were now undocumented, illegal entities in a country known for its aggressive deportation laws. If I went to the police, the twins would be taken to a state facility, and I would be thrown into a detention center. I was forced into a state of total social quarantine. I spent my days walking the cold, rainy streets with a double stroller, searching for illegal cash in hand, cleaning work in the dark basements of local restaurants, trying to earn enough to buy basic baby formula. But the psychological pressure was multiplying. Every time I pushed the stroller into a public park, the environment felt hostile, orchestrated, and watchful. On Thursday afternoon, I left the stroller outside a small bakery for exactly 2 minutes to count my coins through the window. When I returned, a second folded note was lying directly on Anya's woolen blanket. This time, there was text, written in jagged, capital letters. The schedule is fixed. 72 hours remaining. I choked back a scream, grabbing my children and running through the wet alleyways until my lungs burned. The gray sedan followed us from a distance, its tires splashing through the puddles like a silent, metal predator. I realized that someone was executing a strict protocol against us, tracking our exact daily movements, our hours of vulnerability, and our slow, inevitable financial collapse. By Friday, the desperation had completely dismantled my mental stability. I locked the apartment door from the inside, dragging a heavy wooden wardrobe against the frame to create a crude, physical barrier. We had no electricity because the automated utility system had processed Arthur's cancellation request. The apartment was freezing, dark, and dead. The twins were crying from hunger and cold, their small voices echoing through the empty rooms. I sat on the floor, wrapped in a single winter blanket, holding them close while my mind raced through the most terrifying possibilities. Was Arthur involved with an international criminal syndicate? Was this apartment a safe house? Or the men outside tracking his debts through his abandoned family? I had no internet, no cellular network, and no way to contact my relatives back home. The isolation was an absolute, suffocating cage. To block out the terrifying silence and the freezing cold, I found an old, unopened bottle of cooking wine Arthur had left in the back of a kitchen cabinet. I drank it directly from the glass, hoping the alcohol would numb the pounding anxiety in my skull. But the substance only fed the darkness. The shadows on the ceiling began to look like shifting surveillance grids. Every time a car door slammed in the courtyard below, I pressed my hands over my children's mouths, convinced that the silent enforcers were finally ascending the stairs to liquidate our quarantine cell. I was drowning in an unforgiving psychological debt, paying for sins I didn't even understand. The climax of the nightmare occurred on Saturday night, exactly at the end of the 72-hour countdown indicated in the notes. It was 2:45 a.m. I was sitting in the corner of the dark bedroom, my eyes bloodshot from a mix of severe sleep deprivation and toxic anxiety. Suddenly, a violent metallic crash shattered the silence of the hallway. Crack, crack. Someone was using a heavy tool to split the wooden frame of our front door. The wardrobe I had dragged against it began to slide across the floorboards with an agonizing screech. The invisible network was breaking through. They had come to reclaim the apartment. They had come to take my children. Panic paralyzed my chest. I grabbed Leo and Anya, shoving them into the small kitchen pantry behind stacks of empty boxes, telling them to hold their breath. I grabbed a jagged, broken piece of a wooden chair leg. Standing in the center of the dark kitchen, my body shaking so violently I could barely breathe. The front door gave way with a final, echoing boom. Heavy, rapid footsteps rushed into the apartment, flashing powerful tactical beams of white light across the walls. I screamed, swinging the wooden leg into the darkness as a massive, silhouetted figure rushed toward me. Hands pinned my wrists to the floor. A blinding light hit my face, and a firm, commanding voice shouted into a radio, "Target located. Medical emergency. The mother is suffering from acute delirium, and the children are severely malnourished. Get the translation team up here now." When the darkness finally dissipated, I found myself lying in a clean, brightly lit hospital room with a view of a peaceful courtyard. A kind female translator sat by my bed alongside a representative from an international social protection agency. Over the next few days, the terrifying conspiracy that had consumed my mind was gently disassembled. Piece by piece, there was no criminal syndicate. There were no mob cleanup crews. And Arthur wasn't a secret agent. He was simply a coward who had panicked over a massive corporate fraud investigation back home and abandoned his family to escape across another border alone. The mysterious gray sedans outside. They belonged to a local municipal social outreach patrol. They had noticed our irregular arrival and were monitoring the building because the landlord had reported an illegal lease scam. The terrifying handwritten notes left in our mailbox and stroller, "The schedule is fixed," were actually urgent legal notifications from the State Family Welfare Department, translated into a broken automated alphabet by a well-meaning social worker who was trying to warn me that our building was scheduled for a temporary emergency evacuation due to a gas leak. My mind completely broken by the sudden trauma of abandonment, the language barrier, the freezing cold, and the sudden abuse of alcohol had translated ordinary social assistance into a terrifying criminal conspiracy. Today, my children and I are safe. We were safely repatriated back to our home country. My marriage is dead. My savings are gone. But as I hold my twins in our quiet, safe home, I realize that the worst monsters are the ones our own panic creates when we are left entirely alone in the dark.